I am thankful to have connected with you on this podcast. I want to ask you a favor. Please do subscribe, and by doing that, you help us to bring on many wonderful guests that we can all learn from, grow, and make an impact. Thank you so much, Nick Nasev, for
Thank you.
joining Immigrants Making an Impact, the podcast. We are glad you came. Please tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, my name is Nick Nasev. If you can tell by the accent, it's an Australian accent. However, the surname is not a typically Anglo-Australian surname. I'm from a long line of immigrants. So my father was an immigrant from what was Yugoslavia. My mother was born in Australia, but both her parents were refugees, one from Greece, one from Bulgaria. And her grandparents on her mother's side were both also immigrants, and their parents were also immigrants.
Wow.
So, and I'm an immigrant myself. So just a little bit about myself is that, yes, I was born in Australia. I immigrated, and I emphasize immigrated, from Australia to the UK. I live in London and have been here for the most part for the last 22 years. And I'm a translator. I know a number of languages, mainly languages from Southeast Europe, and translate into English. And I'm also, from my experience of being outside of Australia, I have become an expert on Australian English. So I actually also help companies with their texts and copy and adapting their English for an Australian market. So it's changing things culturally, spelling, all these other little things, cultural references, so that they can make their texts appeal to an Australian audience. So that's just a little bit about me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So, looking at your immigrant journey, it connects way back to your great-great-grandmother and father,
That's right.
and then your parents, and then look at you also in another country.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that has really stricken me is your accent.
Mm-hmm.
And you made it very clear. So that is the Australian accent right there. So as an immigrant, how do people receive your accent?
Well, first of all, a lot of people are quite surprised that after 22 years of, especially going from one English-speaking country to another, that that my accent would have changed during that time, and it hasn't. I still speak in a predominantly Australian accent. The accent itself depends, of course. We all speak differently. We're on the phone, and my accent will change. So I don't speak as overtly Australian as I would when I go back to Australia, for instance. It becomes even stronger. When talking with people from, particularly people who don't have English as their primary language, my accent becomes a bit muted, you could really say, but that's to facilitate understanding. So for British people, for instance, the accent has had a mixed history. One thing I didn't realize until coming to the UK is that accent determines your education level. So, which is something that doesn't really happen in Australia anymore. So people that in the UK that have got a university education tend to have RP, received pronunciation. That's like the type of what most people around the world consider to be the English accent, even though in England and the whole of the United Kingdom, there are various different regional accents. But anyone that's gone to university has picked up a prestige, a proper accent. Now, traditionally, British people see Australians as being a bit easygoing, and therefore we're not as educated or cultured as British people. And so there has been some discrimination at times because of my accent, that people have presumed things without even delving or asking me questions. I've had people question whether my university education, whether I actually had any university education, solely based on my accent. So there has been negative things. And then there's also positive sides. So Australians and it's the accent that gives away that I am Australian, not by my look, definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
There's also positive connotations usually built up from stereotypes of what Australia is like, or images of what British people wish Australia looks like. So I've been able to use them to my advantage as well.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great that you have been able to use that to your advantage. And let's switch back to your immigrant story. So you could have lived in any country. Why England?
Yes, that's true. And I get asked this quite often because it's not Australia is, of course, a very developed country with a high
Mhm.
standard of living. It's a place that people immigrate to,
Yes.
like the case with my father, my grandparents, my great grandparents, all immigrated to Australia.
Hmm.
Why would anyone want to leave Australia then? And in my case, it's because for the skills that I have, especially when it comes to languages, they're not as well required. Then there isn't a big demand for people that know languages other than English.
Mm.
Yes, we do have the need for community languages and interpreters and translators, particularly interpreters, for to accommodate for people that have immigrated to Australia. However, my languages, they're a bit more of older ethnic communities. There's already enough people that cover the language work for these communities, for the languages that I speak in. So there wasn't really that much opportunity for me to actually remain in Australia and do the things with my skills. I mean, don't take me wrong. I mean, I could have perfectly stayed in Australia, had a very perfect and comfortable life. However, it wouldn't have been a fulfilling.
Mm.
So the opportunity came up to come to the UK. I was a bit apprehensive of going to the UK when I did because there was a bit of a conveyor belt of people. It was very easy, thanks to connections with the Commonwealth for Australians, likewise with like New Zealanders, to go to London, do a couple of years here, and then go back to Australia when they've got it out of their system, usually travel around Europe. So I didn't want to do it, be the, like follow, be like the sheep and go there. But I was convinced that there would be opportunities here in London, in particular, that aren't available in Australia. So the option was, let's try it out.
Mhm.
So I did. And a lot of what they said, what was promised to me, which I was totally unconvinced at first, actually did happen. So the opportunities did eventually appear.
That's quite a journey. So I love the fact that you share that you could have chosen to live in Australia, but that will not have been a fulfilled life.
That's right.
So this is really intentional.
Absolutely. It's because of that where people don't actually, and I get this a lot from people in the UK, they don't see me as an immigrant
Mm-hmm.
because I have come from what can be considered a rich country.
Mm-hmm.
The stereotype or like the mold that people have of what constitutes an immigrant doesn't fit for, I don't fit into that mold.
Mm.
uh Immigrants in the eyes of many people, not just in Britain but also in Australia, is somebody going from a poor country to a rich country.
Mm-hmm.
And people going from a rich country to a rich country, obviously they're only doing it temporarily, expats, to use the term, and so likewise I then get treated as someone who's not an immigrant by people.
Mm.
And then it becomes a bit of a shock to especially a lot of people in Britain when I tell them that I have to go through the same hurdles as any other immigrant, any
Mm-hmm.
other person who's not a citizen of the UK,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the biggest shock for these people. How come you have to do that? And I was like, because I'm not a UK citizen. Well, at the time, I was like, what do you mean you have to do tests and the citizenship test? And like, yes, they really can't believe it. And why? Because I speak English.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a rich country. That for some reason they think that this just doesn't apply to us. It was like, yes, it does.
That's quite interesting because I love the angle that you are taking us today because yeah, many people have never thought about it that way, that if you immigrate from a rich country, like there are stereotypical ideas about you coming from a rich country, and people just think that you are past the law, that you just get things given to you like that.
Yeah, I mean, I won't. Granted, there are certain aspects of the immigration process which have been facilitated. Coming from another Commonwealth country where English is the dominant language and still part of the Commonwealth, so of course the Queen's still on the money as well in Australia. Well, King now is on the money in Australia, like in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things that were, you could say, there were at benefit. So I didn't have to face the situation like many other immigrants of not having their qualifications recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Mine were, without having to go through any humiliating process of having to re-qualify. I didn't have to sit an English language test, for instance, as I come from an English dominant country and have got education fully in English. So that was a hurdle that I didn't have to go through. But I still had to pay for the and put application forms in and police records and the whole situation that everyone else has to go through for the whole to become a citizen, or even just obtaining a work permit to start off with, and then also getting permanent residency here.
I can understand. So let's pause and reflect, Nick. How has the journey been so far? Take us through some of the challenges, the wins, and during challenging times. How were you able to navigate that?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges, of course, is that I came here with the intention of using my skills, my language skills. Now, what was quite difficult with that was for the nature of the visa that I had, first of all, didn't allow really for permanent type work. So I had to face the situation that potential employers were not willing to employ me because I didn't have UK citizenship, or at the time EU citizenship, nor did I have a visa that lasted for longer than 2 years. So that was a bit, I have to say that the many opportunities that did miss me in that first year in particular were huge, which was rather, how do I say it? It did put me, I was really upset about that. The fact that I've come here to get these jobs and they exist, but just because of the anomaly that I wasn't born in this country, I'm not entitled to this. And that's the situation that most immigrants have to face when they first start off in a new country. So that was one thing. However, I was determined to get a work permit to remain in the UK. For the work permit to obtain one meant that that would be showing that I do have the unique skills to remain in this country. And through some chance meetings, there's always an element of luck here. I got to meet some people who were working in the person that used to sit next to me at one of the jobs that I was working in. Her housemate worked at a subtitling company. And she said, why don't you talk to her? I'll talk to her and we'll see what we can do. And a position came up and they offered me the job. But I then told them that you'll have to apply for a work permit for me. And they did, which was a bit of a shock that they did it. And I was expecting that this would take quite a long time to do. But 2 weeks later, I got the work permit and I was so happy. I was like, that was probably one of the biggest wins that I've ever had, because I thought that this was like an impossible task to achieve. And for it to happen as well so quickly in the end was like the cherry on the top. I was absolutely thrilled to bits about that. Unfortunately, that job didn't last for too long. So I had to leave the country for a brief period of time until the opportunity was then I had the job was given back to me afterwards, after the circumstances had changed. This was during the time in the lead up to the war in Iraq in 2003, where there was just such uncertainty, and the company was just that uncertainty. I was a victim of it. But from that, I think some of the biggest challenges after that was just the and this is such an immigrant thing, the ever-changing terms and conditions and legislation to do with immigration. How many while I was with my work permit, for instance, the minimum period of time that you needed to remain in the UK before you can get to permanent residency was changed, so it was extended, and it wasn't retro. It didn't change if you got it like on different conditions. So you had to live with the new conditions. And it was just that whole situation as well of being tied to the one employer as well. I couldn't apply for other jobs unless they were willing to go through the whole work permit process. But during that time, they made the whole process much harder for employers. So yeah, there were times there where I felt restricted, locked, and that way I felt that I was also being exploited. But I did manage to finally get my citizenship after a few hurdles and a few setbacks. But perseverance, in particular, was the main goal. Was the thing that got me through.
Perseverance. Don't give up. Keep going.
Mm.
Cool. And so I know that as a translator, you work for yourself as an entrepreneur.
Yes, I do.
How is it like to be an entrepreneur, an immigrant entrepreneur in the UK?
I think this is where one of the advantages that I have in coming from Australia is the fact that British people, if we're going to be a bit more general in their attitudes, is that they tend to be a little bit more reserved. They're not ones to really be outgoing as such. And it's a quality that they're at the same time can find crass, but they also admire it because they feel like their culture doesn't really allow them to do it because they see it as something crass or something a bit that's not considered to be cultured. And that's why it takes them like the best time to be in a place in the UK is usually Friday evening after they've had a couple of drinks, because that usually loosens them up and they get to talk a bit more. Well, I don't need that. I will just talk. And that helps in being an entrepreneur, and the fact that you can be outgoing and talk to people, strangers, and that comes from a more Australian type of attitude, where Australians tend to be very happy people, outgoing, like to talk. I think it's all because of the sun that we've had over all our time, that we're just very much full of energy and wanting to socialize. So with that aspect of the culture that I grew up in, I've been able to use that to my advantage in order to network, gain contacts, talk to people, and in the process build up my business.
Great. So your cultural background has really helped you in navigating your journey as an immigrant entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And tell me some of the challenges that you face on the day-to-day while starting and growing your business in a new country.
Oh, okay. One of the biggest challenges has been until I actually got my permanent residency, I think it was just the fact that the uncertainty, the fact that you've only got a set time, you could really say, of on whether it be the visa that you're on, limited some of the businesses, some of the things that you could do. I mean, we're talking about bureaucratic situations. Say, for instance, if you want to take out a loan, then you'll have banks that will be very reluctant to do such a thing. Even something like opening up a business bank account can also be a major task, because banks are very, oh, well, you're not a citizen, you're not permanent here, who's to say that you're going to leave tomorrow. That was one of the, I think that was probably the biggest challenge, of the fact that, especially when building up the business, is the fact that, oh, you're not seen as being permanent enough. And there's the trust that comes with that. They'd rather be the fact that somebody is tied to a place. You'll find, I found that clients have been more willing to talk to people of that nature rather than somebody who's still considered to be foreign.
Wow. So if there's anybody listening and they want to start their business as immigrants in the UK, what advice would you give to them?
Hmm. Let's see. One of the things I would really, some of the advice I'd give is, yeah, perseverance is one of the big things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't let prejudices or stereotypes get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if they do, use them to your advantage. Find out what are the things that how, say, for instance, how British people see you as a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
not individually, but group of people. Try and work out a way that you can use that to your advantage. For me, how many British people saw Australians as being outgoing people. Well, then go for it. Be
Mm-hmm.
outgoing, and they'll appreciate you for it. So if you're hardworking, for instance, be hardworking. Show that you are. Show that you've got diligence. I think that is what a lot of British people see as a plus. That the people that are coming to the UK, as especially once they set their roots here, or set themselves up, show that you work hard, and then the benefits will come from that.
Mm-hmm.
And also be prepared that there's going to be no's. That there will be setbacks. There will be the petty bureaucracy that happens. Say, for instance, opening a bank account. Don't give up. It's more of a case of like, then just try what's plan B, what's plan C, what's plan D.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, alternatives. Just really, it's a case of just not giving up, and also just talking to other people. Find out networking, especially in the fact that our immigrant groups, we as much as that there can be disagreements, and we're humans.
Mm-hmm.
um, any group of people, there's always going to be people who disagree. But with the amount of resources now, especially when we've got the internet, we've got groups on social media, there's people to ask questions now, and so many people out there are willing to give answers.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's always a case of weeding through those answers. Some people aren't the best in giving advice, but still, there will be gems of advice that people can give. Um, Listen to those people that have had experience, and they'll be able to put you in the right direction. Usually, much better than any of the officials in bureaucracy can.
Absolutely, I agree. So work hard, persevere, connect with people, ask
Mm.
questions. I mean, your own values, work with your values, right?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
This is a personal question to you. So what is the most important thing that you would do today to make tomorrow better?
More kindness. I would like to see more kindness amongst people. That's one of the
Mm,
things that I'm finding, especially in the past, recently. I'd like to see that people are kinder to each other. Um, I'm seeing especially that we have platforms on social media.
mhm,
People are finding that it's just way too easy to air opinions that were best kept to themselves. I have to
mm,
say, without thinking that the opinions can hurt others. Why do that? Really? Is it
mm.
necessary to say bad things about other people, or how other people live, or things that you don't understand, and so you just show fear by being anti? I just think that people, for something that uh, for a better future, that we should just be kinder to each other, and treat others as the way that we would like to be treated ourselves.
The golden rules. Be kind to
Mm-hmm.
one another and treat others the same way we want to be treated. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. So, Nick, what would you do if you knew you would never fail?
Oh my God. Everything. Wow. Um, oh wow. That's such everything, I think. No, if I can fail, I'd probably learn even more languages. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's something that's, as much as I've got a number of languages, but there's some languages who I always just stop speaking because I've got this fear that I'm not saying things 100% correctly. And
Hmm.
it's an irrational fear. It's
Hmm.
absolutely irrational. But if I could not fail, I would be so speaking these languages, and yeah, absolutely communicating with people. much more than I am now.
All right, and go ahead and do it. Learn one more, two more languages.
Absolutely.
Okay? Wonderful. So how many languages do you speak?
That's always the question as well. See, I one of the weird things that have happened is even in my lifetime, the number of languages has increased without me actually doing anything. So one of the languages when I was a child, I grew up in a very multilingual situation where most of the people who are around me, even though living in Australia, most of them at the time couldn't speak English. So in order to speak to, as a child, say for instance, when I was 4 years old, if I wanted to say, I'm hungry, I want food, I would have to say it in their language. I couldn't say it in English. So I grew up with Macedonian, Bulgarian, and what was known as Serbo-Croatian at the time. They were my main languages, with English, of course, always being in the background, whether it be TV, radio, and then eventually school. And then there was always Greek as well, but I don't speak Greek that well anymore. I also, what happened is that with the numbers is that Serbo-Croatian, we had our wars in Yugoslavia in the 90s. And in the process, what was one language, due to more political reasons, became four. So it looks really impressive when I write down that I know Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, Montenegrin, when in actual fact, they're pretty much the same language. But use the wrong word with the wrong person and it can be very dangerous at times.
Culturally.
Absolutely. So different influences and also political reasons for that too as well. But so I also know Russian. I also know a bit of Turkish. I know very good Spanish. I'm okay with German. And I'm actually in the process of learning Albanian. So they're the main languages that I either work with or have some knowledge in.
Impressive. And I would recommend that you add Dutch to it. So I speak Dutch so that we can communicate now and then in Dutch.
I would.
Cool. So finally, we want to invite our community to support you. Are there any projects you are doing that you need help with or you want us to know about?
I'm not at the moment, though I will be in the future looking more to getting one thing that I do with my translations is genealogy. So people looking up their future, their past. Of course, this is a very, it comes from a very North American, Australian, English, UK type of cultural situation where people are investigating their past. And it's very easy for them to do it because there are records that they can actually go to. Most of my clients come from people of Balkan origin in North America and Australia, and they are totally unaware that most records just don't exist. So, but what I have been doing is that I'm starting to build up a network of people who are also interested or have experience in translating old documents, especially personal documents, old letters. So that's something in the pipeline. I've already got a few people where we can refer people to others, because that's the best way. It's not something that you can just easily find on the internet, somebody who can actually do these type of translations. But word of mouth is always the best.
Absolutely. So yeah, guys, let's connect with Nick and see how we can make a significant impact through translation.
Yes, please.
So finally, Nick, please complete the sentence for me. Immigrants are
everywhere, all around you.
So sweet. Okay, I've never heard that before. Immigrants are everywhere. Yes, indeed, we are everywhere.
We are everywhere, even in the most unlikely of places. I have to say that immigrants are everywhere.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.